I think Monday's episode of General Hospital could bring plenty of tension to the Quartermain property, especially once Brooklyn Quartermain realizes that Willow Kane is living on the estate again. To me, Brooklyn is unlikely to simply accept Willow's return without a fight. The bigger question is whether Tracy Quartermain will actually let Brooklyn get her way, or whether family loyalty will once again win out. Willow will have another encounter with Harrison Chase, and, as usual, Chase will be shirtless. He'll apparently be surprised to discover that Willow has moved back into the gatehouse, but I don't expect her to reveal all the details behind the decision, especially if doing so could make her look bad. Instead, Willow may try to convince herself that moving back to the Quartermain property has a silver lining. I'm wondering if that silver lining could have something to do with Chase. If Willow sees another opening to get closer to him, she may not waste much time pursuing it. Brooklyn, meanwhile, will be determined to stop Willow's new living arrangement before it becomes permanent. She'll urge Tracy to get Michael Corinthos involved and make it clear that Willow cannot stay there. However, Tracy doesn't appear willing to reverse her decision. It reportedly took some convincing for Tracy to agree to let Willow stay in the first place, and she may feel that she has already given her word. Instead, Tracy could use Wiley Corinthos and Amelia Corinthos as the ultimate argument. They're Quartermains too, and Tracy can easily argue that the family has a responsibility to look after its own. I think that could put Brooklyn in a difficult position, because arguing against Willow's presence could start looking like she's arguing against her own family. While Brooklyn and Tracy battle over Willow, Carly Spencer will be working on a strategy of her own. Carly will meet with Hudson Parker, and Hudson may insist that there's simply no way to convince Jocelyn Jacks to step into the CEO position at Jasper Jacks' company. He may consider the situation a dead end, but Carly won't see it that way. I think Carly could push Hudson to try harder and use every possible angle to get Jocelyn interested in the position. Perhaps she'll even suggest that Hudson turn on the charm and see whether he can persuade Jocelyn personally. At the same time, Jocelyn will turn to Michael for advice. Since she's trying to find the right person to run the company instead of taking the CEO position herself, Michael may be able to offer some useful guidance. However, I don't think Michael will help completely for free. He'll assure Jocelyn that he's willing to help, but he'll want something in return. That immediately makes me wonder what kind of trade Michael has in mind. If Jocelyn agrees, this could turn into a deal that has consequences beyond simply finding a CEO. Elsewhere, Lucas Jones will continue strengthening his connection with Joe Fitzpatrick. I think this storyline could be moving toward more romantic developments, especially if the two continue finding reasons to spend time together. Finally, Serena Baldwin will apparently get pushy and strike back. The interesting part is figuring out who she'll target. Could Serena go after Michael? Will Tracy become her next obstacle? Or might Lucy Coe somehow find herself caught in Serena's crosshairs? Honestly, I think Monday's episode could set several conflicts in motion at once. Brooklyn wants Willow gone. Carly is pulling strings behind the scenes. Michael is looking for a trade, and Serena appears ready to make another move. And if Willow really does see Chase as an opportunity, the Quartermain property could become even more complicated before anyone realizes just how messy this situation is going to get. I think Friday's General Hospital had several characters quietly setting bigger plans into motion, and honestly, some of these developments could create serious trouble down the road. At the studio apartment above Charlie's pub, ADA Justine Turner confronted Sonny Corinthos about Jen Sidwell's transfer to Pentonville after his plea deal. Justine clearly worried that Sonny might arrange for Sidwell to be dealt with behind bars. Sonny insisted that if something happened to Sidwell, it wouldn't be his responsibility. What caught my attention, though, was Sonny opening up about his decision to leave the mob. Even with their relationship becoming more complicated, Sonny and Justine still agreed that their romance had to remain a secret. Sonny made it clear he wasn't ready to give her up, So for now, they're choosing to keep things hidden. Meanwhile, Jason Morgan stopped by Carly Spencer's place and cleaned up after helping with her lawnmower. He also told Carly that he had decided to stop working for Sonny. The conversation eventually turned emotional, with Jason and Carly reassuring each other that, regardless of everything happening around them, their bond wasn't going to change. Over at the Quartermain mansion, Michael Corinthos admitted to Tracy Quartermain that he was blackmailing Willow Kane into living in the gatehouse. He wanted Tracy's permission, but she initially refused. Tracy believed Michael should simply use the information he had against Willow, rather than give her another chance. Michael, however, had a different goal. He wanted his children to maintain a relationship with their mother, even if that meant taking a drastic approach. Tracy worried about how Brooklyn Quartermain would react, especially given everything going on within the family. Michael eventually brought up Monica Quartermain and appealed to Tracy's love for their family. I think that finally got through to her. Tracy gave in and promised she would deal with Brooklyn herself. At the Metro Court Gardens, Alexis Davis tried once again to convince Drew Quartermain to allow Scout Quartermain to spend time with her family. Drew refused and became even more unpleasant about the situation. That was when Jack Brennan stepped in. Brennan noticed the tension and delivered a veiled warning to Drew, essentially reminding him that there could be consequences if he didn't start behaving. Drew decided it was time to leave. Alexis then asked Brennan what kind of dirt he had on Drew. Brennan agreed to share what he knew, but naturally, he wanted something in return. He demanded information connected to Jasper Jack's enterprises. To me, this could become a very interesting deal, because Alexis and Brennan both have reasons to dig into Drew's business dealings. If they start exchanging information, Drew could suddenly find himself facing problems from multiple directions. Meanwhile, outside the Quartermain boathouse, Charlotte Cassadine encouraged Danny Morgan to fight dirty. She suggested that Danny come up with something he could use against Drew, even if it meant sinking to Drew's level. Danny eventually accepted that he needed dirt on Drew. Charlotte made it clear that whatever they discovered needed to make Drew look really bad. And I have to admit, this feels like the beginning of something that could spiral quickly. Charlotte has already shown that she's willing to manipulate situations, while Danny is angry enough to consider crossing lines he normally wouldn't. At the Metro Court pool, Scout confided in Rocco Falconeri and made him promise to keep their conversation secret. Scout admitted something surprisingly complicated. Although she was happy Drew had recovered from his wheelchair-related injuries, her life had actually been easier when he was in the wheelchair. That doesn't mean Scout wanted anything bad to happen to Drew. I think she simply missed the freedom and family connections she had before Drew became so controlling. Scout especially missed spending time with Sam McCall's side of the family. Rocco eventually came up with a plan. Scout could make Drew believe she was following his rules, while secretly finding ways to do what she wanted. The two then started figuring out how they could continue seeing each other without Drew finding out, especially since Drew strongly disapproved of Rocco's connection to Sonny. Finally, at the Quartermain stables, Molly Lansing Davis found Cody Bell dealing with the aftermath of a horse bite on his hand. She could also tell that Cody was feeling down after James West left town. Molly managed to lift his spirits by suggesting that they take a trip to Savannah together. She'll be promoting her book at a convention there, giving the two of them an opportunity to spend some real time together, away from Port Charles. I'm wondering if this trip could be exactly what Molly and Cody need. With fewer distractions and some distance from the chaos back home, they may finally have a chance to figure out what they really mean to each other. Overall, Friday's episode felt less like a collection of separate storylines and more like several pieces being positioned for what comes next. Sonny is trying to leave the mob while secretly pursuing Justine. Jason is stepping away from Sonny. Alexis is digging into Drew. And the younger generation is already plotting behind the adults' backs. And if Charlotte, Danny, Scout, and Rocco continue playing their secret games, I think the Quartermain family drama could get even messier. Before anyone realizes just how much these kids have been planning, I think General Hospital may be setting up a very interesting twist involving Jack Brennan, Jasper Jack's Enterprises, and Jordan Ashford. It's becoming increasingly clear that Brennan has suspicions about what's really going on inside the company. To me, that means he's going to need someone on the inside who can investigate without immediately raising alarms. At first, I wondered if Brennan might force Jocelyn Jacks into taking the CEO position she doesn't want, with the expectation that she would report everything back to him. But honestly, that doesn't seem like the best fit. Brennan already had an opportunity to push Jocelyn into that arrangement, and he chose not to do it. Plus, dealing with Jocelyn's anger and constant complaints probably isn't exactly Brennan's idea of a pleasant work environment. So I think the writers may have another candidate in mind, and Jordan Ashford could be that person. During the week of August 17th to 21st, Jocelyn will reportedly turn to Michael Corinthos for help finding someone to replace her as CEO. Michael could potentially suggest Jordan, especially after the two recently crossed paths. Jordan may actually be a surprisingly good fit for the position. She no longer works for Jen Sidwell, but despite all the deception surrounding that job, she clearly enjoyed the corporate side of it. Her original mission was to uncover Sidwell's secrets, but she also seemed to appreciate the position, the responsibility, and, of course, the paycheck. Now Jordan appears ready to move up the corporate ladder. And I think the timing is particularly interesting because GH spoilers indicate that she'll receive a surprising offer on August 19th. Then, on August 21st, someone will reportedly vouch for Jordan. I'm wondering if that could be the final push needed to put her in charge of Jasper Jack's Enterprises. Jocelyn may eventually tell Hudson Parker that Jordan is the person she wants to take over for her. If that happens, Jordan could suddenly find herself sitting in one of the most important corporate positions in Port Charles. But here's where I think the story could get much more complicated. What if Jordan's new CEO position comes with another assignment, one that Brennan never intended to mention until she was already in place? Jordan recently hinted that she might be interested in consulting work for Valentine Cassadine. However, I could see Brennan deciding that he wants Jordan working for him instead. After all, Jordan has already proven that she knows how to operate inside a questionable organization while quietly investigating what's really happening behind the scenes. That makes her almost perfect for Brennan's purposes. And if Jordan refuses? Well, I don't think Brennan is necessarily the kind of man who hears the word no and simply walks away. If the WSB becomes involved, Jordan could discover that Brennan's request isn't really a request at all. That would put Jordan in a fascinating position. On the surface, she would be the new CEO of Jasper Jack's Enterprises, potentially enjoying the promotion and the financial rewards that come with it. Behind the scenes, however, she could be forced to spy on the very company she has just agreed to lead. I think that could create a terrific conflict for Jordan. She would have to decide how far she's willing to go for Brennan while protecting her own career, and possibly the people who work for the company. Of course, I could be completely wrong about this. The surprising offer Jordan receives could lead somewhere else entirely. But if General Hospital is preparing to put Jordan in the CEO chair, I have to wonder whether Brennan's interest in Jasper Jack's Enterprises is about to make her new job much more dangerous than she ever expected. To me, Jordan becoming CEO only to discover that Brennan wants her to be his inside operative would be a very GH-style twist. So I'll be watching closely to see what Jordan's big offer turns out to be, and whether her next promotion comes with a secret assignment she can't refuse. I think Willow Kane's return to the Quartermain gatehouse could be about much more than simply giving Michael Corinthos a way to keep an eye on her. There's a very thin line between love and hate in Port Charles, and I'm wondering if the writers are setting Willow and Michael up for another unexpected collision, one that could bring their old chemistry roaring back to life. While Willow was under the influence of the drugs Jacinda Bracken gave her, she shared some surprisingly sweet and even flirty moments with Michael. To me, those scenes felt important because the show seemed determined to remind us that these two once cared deeply about each other. Of course, everything changed after Michael's latest blackmail move. Michael used Trina Robinson's and Kai Taylor's signed affidavits about Willow shooting Drew Kane to force her into accepting his terms. Now Willow is being pushed back into the Quartermain gatehouse, with Michael planning to keep a much closer watch on her because of the children. On the surface, Michael is using the arrangement to supervise Willow, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if part of him also enjoys making her uncomfortable. These two may genuinely despise each other right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean the chemistry has disappeared. In fact, I think this is exactly the kind of situation where a soap opera can turn hatred into temptation. Michael and Willow will now be living on the same property and spending more time around each other as a family. That could create plenty of opportunities for old memories and old feelings to resurface. We've already seen how difficult it was for these two to stay away from each other in the past. There was even a time when Willow and Michael couldn't make it through Wiley Corinthos' birthday celebration without sneaking away together to the gatehouse. That was back when Willow was married to Harrison Chase, and their inability to resist each other created a major complication. So, could history repeat itself? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the writers could be deliberately putting these characters back into an environment where their emotional boundaries are tested. The betrayal, resentment, blackmail, and family drama are all still there, but underneath that hostility is a history neither character can completely erase. GH has already transformed Willow and Michael from former lovers into enemies. I wouldn't rule out the possibility that the show eventually flips that dynamic again and turns their anger into a dangerous kind of attraction. And that's why Willow's move to the gatehouse feels significant to me. There has to be a storytelling reason for putting these two exes under the same roof again. Now that the show is also giving Rory Gibson and Caitlin McMullen plenty of opportunities to show how strong they can be together in emotionally complicated scenes, I think the writers may be testing just how far this combustible pairing can go. Could all that hostility eventually lead to Willow and Michael crossing a line they absolutely shouldn't? I think it's possible. General Hospital may have plenty more fighting, resentment, and family drama ahead for Michael and Willow, but I'm wondering if the real twist is that the gatehouse could eventually become the place where their old chemistry becomes impossible for either of them to ignore. General Hospital spoilers have me wondering if Kirsten Storms may be dropping a few subtle hints about a possible return to Port Charles. Storms recently gave GH fans something to talk about when she revealed on Instagram that she's back in Los Angeles and, perhaps more interestingly, back to her signature blonde hair. I think the timing of those two updates is what really got people speculating about Maxi. Earlier this month, Storms showed off a brunette look, but apparently that transformation didn't last very long. She shared a photo with the caption, "Back in Cali, back to blonde," and later posted again about the change, thanking her hairstylist for the new dye job, while mentioning that she's back in Los Angeles. Now, I want to be careful here because none of this actually confirms a General Hospital comeback. To me, it could simply mean Kirsten Storms wanted her usual blonde hairstyle again and had personal reasons for returning to LA. There could be plenty going on behind the scenes that has nothing to do with Maxi. Still, I can understand why GH fans immediately started wondering. Storms looking more like Maxi again, while confirming she's back in Los Angeles, certainly makes the possibility interesting. And story-wise, I don't think a Maxi return would be difficult to explain. Maxi recently left Port Charles with Damien Spinelli and their children for Australia. But that doesn't necessarily mean she has to stay there permanently. If the writers wanted to bring her back, there are plenty of believable reasons for Maxi to make a trip home. One obvious possibility involves James West. Cody Bell has already been missing James and wishing he were still around the stables. I was thinking that James could easily become the reason for a temporary Maxi return. Maybe James wants to visit Cody and the horses, or perhaps Maxi simply decides it's time for the family to spend some time back in Port Charles. And once Maxi is back, we all know how quickly things can become complicated. She could get pulled into the latest deception drama, reconnect with old friends, or stumble into a storyline that gives her a reason to stick around longer than expected. General Hospital has certainly done this kind of temporary return before. So, could Kirsten Storms be preparing to reprise the role of Maxi? I think it's possible, but I wouldn't call it confirmed based on an Instagram hair transformation and an LA update alone. It may be nothing more than Storms returning to her preferred look and getting back to her life in California. At the same time, I don't think we can completely rule out a Maxi comeback either. If Storms does eventually return, her recent posts could look like some very interesting breadcrumbs in hindsight. But for now, I think it's best to treat the Maxi theory as speculation rather than a spoiler set in stone. Either way, Port Charles has plenty of chaos waiting, and if Maxi does come home, I have a feeling her return could create a whole new wave of drama. If I'm reading the current General Hospital storyline correctly, Willow Kane may be much closer to disaster than she realizes. Her custody battle with Michael Corinthos has already become incredibly hostile, but I think the situation could be heading somewhere far more dangerous. Even Nina Reeves seemed to sense that something terrible was coming during the August 12th episode. While arguing with Willow, Nina warned that the custody fight had spiraled completely out of control and pleaded with her daughter to find some kind of peace with Michael. Nina even feared that their growing hatred could lead to something truly tragic. But Willow didn't seem interested in backing down. Instead, I think Willow believes she has the upper hand. Because Michael was drugged, she seems convinced that she has enough leverage to force him into a corner. From Willow's perspective, that could make her feel almost untouchable. The problem is that Michael may have a much stronger weapon. Trina Robinson and Kai Taylor have now revealed that they were present on the night Drew Kane was shot. More importantly, they remember hearing Willow's distinctive ringtone. That puts Willow in a potentially dangerous position because Michael may finally have the information he needs to fight back. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Michael plays tit for tat. If Willow uses what she knows about Michael to threaten his relationship with the kids, Michael could respond by exposing what he knows about Willow and Drew. That could turn their custody battle into something much bigger and potentially much more destructive. I think this is where Nina's warning becomes especially important. The tragedy she fears could involve Willow, Michael, or even their children. And there may be another wild card waiting in the shadows, Jack Brennan. Brennan has been deeply involved in the schemes surrounding Nina and Willow, particularly their efforts to deal with Drew. With his own fate already appearing to be sealed, I have to wonder whether Brennan's death could somehow become connected to the chaos between Willow and Michael. Based on Brennan's history, I could easily see him stepping in if Willow makes a dangerous move against Michael. Maybe he tries to protect Willow. Maybe he acts on Nina's behalf. Or maybe he simply gets caught in a situation that becomes impossible to control. And that raises an even bigger question. How exactly does Brennan meet his end? Could he go out trying to save Willow or Nina? Could his death be the result of some WSB operation finally catching up with him? Considering how deeply Brennan is involved in intrigue, either possibility feels believable to me. Then again, there's another possibility that makes this storyline even more interesting. What if Agent Jax somehow becomes Brennan's replacement? I'm still trying to wrap my head around the idea of her spy Barbie transformation, but at this point, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if General Hospital took things even further and elevated her to PC Bureau Chief. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but the pieces seem to be lining up for a major chain reaction. Willow thinks she has leverage over Michael. Michael may have evidence that could destroy Willow's position. Nina already senses that things could end tragically, and Brennan's impending demise adds another unpredictable element to the whole situation. To me, that sounds less like a custody dispute and more like a disaster waiting for the right spark. So I'm wondering, is Michael finally going to turn the tables on Willow? And could Brennan's death be the event that sends this entire storyline into chaos? I think Danny Morgan may be about to put Charlotte Cassadine in a very tricky position when he asks for her help arranging a secret meeting with Scout Kane. At first, it might sound like a simple request between siblings, but considering Drew Kane's jealousy and deep resentment toward Danny and the Morgan family, I was wondering if this could turn into a much bigger problem than Danny realizes. Drew is watching Scout like a hawk these days. If she's at the Metro Court pool, he's there. If she goes somewhere else, somehow Drew seems to be right behind her. Honestly, if it weren't summer break, I wouldn't be surprised if he had someone keeping an eye on her at school, too. To me, Scout feels almost persecuted by her father, simply because she wants to maintain relationships with the people she has left from her mother's side of the family. She wants her grandmother, her aunts Alexis Davis and Molly Lansing Davis, and especially her brother Danny in her life. The problem is that Drew doesn't seem willing to allow that. Danny understands how trapped Scout feels, and that's why he thinks Charlotte could be the perfect person to help. After all, Charlotte has experience keeping a relationship with her father's secret when her mother didn't approve. So, if anyone understands how to arrange a secret meeting, it might be Charlotte. Of course, there are plenty of obstacles. The island would seem like an obvious place for Danny and Scout to meet, except Danny already messed up the speedboat and isn't allowed to use it anymore. Getting Scout to the Quartermain Lake creates another problem, because Drew has apparently forbidden her from swimming there. I was wondering if Drew's feelings about that location could have something to do with his own wheelchair accident at the Quartermain property. The official story calls it an accident, but given everything that has happened, I'm not sure everyone in Port Charles sees it quite that simply. Charlotte may be willing to help, but even she has to figure out how to pull this off without Drew discovering what they're planning. The good news for Danny is that Drew hasn't forbidden Scout from spending time with Charlotte. That gives Charlotte at least one possible opening. She could arrange for the two girls to spend some time together, and then perhaps they can brainstorm a way to get Danny and Scout together without Drew finding out. I think the real issue here is that Scout doesn't simply want to rebel against her father. She wants Drew to understand that she needs her family. She needs her brother, her grandmother, and her aunts. And she shouldn't have to choose between loving her father and maintaining those relationships. Drew, however, seems so consumed by his hatred and resentment toward the family he believes abandoned him that he's having trouble seeing how much his behavior is hurting Scout. And that could eventually become the bigger story. If Danny and Charlotte manage to pull off this secret meeting, I think Drew's reaction could be explosive. He may believe he's protecting Scout, but the tighter he pulls that leash, the more likely she is to start looking for ways to break free. Maybe I'm wrong, but this feels like the kind of situation that could push Scout and Drew even further apart. And Danny may be willing to take a major risk to make sure his sister knows she isn't alone. I think Curtis may have felt victorious when he finally got his day in court, but when the verdict came down, it was hard to see a real winner in this situation. Curtis was found guilty of second-degree assault for punching Isaiah and was sentenced to 10 years in Pentonville, although he will be eligible for parole after 2 years. To me, that is a devastating outcome, especially because those first 2 years are going to be a huge part of his newborn son's life. Curtis had been going after Isaiah for weeks. He was convinced that Isaiah had abandoned him and Jordan on the side of the road after the crash they caused. I can understand why Curtis was angry, and I was wondering for a while whether he might eventually uncover something that would prove his suspicions were justified. But there is a major difference between demanding answers and physically assaulting someone. Curtis seemed far too confident that he would never be found guilty. He rejected a plea deal, took the case to trial, and ultimately lost. Now he is facing prison time, while his family has to deal with the consequences of his decision. Isaiah, technically, was the winner. The jury believed that Curtis assaulted him, and Curtis is now being punished for it. Isaiah even smiled when he heard the verdict, which made me wonder whether this was really about justice for him, or whether there was also some satisfaction in finally getting Curtis out of his way. Then Isaiah crossed paths with Jordan at the very scene where everything began. Surprisingly, Jordan was more civil with her ex than I expected. Isaiah told her that he wanted justice, but he didn't want to destroy Curtis's life. I'm not completely convinced that tells the whole story. Curtis has been a major thorn in Isaiah's side, and now Isaiah is finally free of him. He can move forward with Portia and Desmond without Curtis constantly accusing him of wrongdoing. But the people who truly lose here may be the children. Curtis's newborn son is going to miss precious time with his father, and Trina is caught in the fallout as well. Whatever happened on the night of that accident, the consequences are now reaching far beyond Curtis and Isaiah. I think Curtis was wrong to assault Isaiah. Even if Isaiah was somehow involved in the accident, the jury is still out on that question, and nothing justified Curtis's ranting, confrontation, or punch. At the same time, I have to wonder whether a 10-year sentence for an assault has created consequences that are much bigger than the original crime. Curtis made a terrible choice, but his children are the ones who may suffer the most for it. So, was Curtis completely responsible for what happened? Absolutely. But was the punishment fair, or did the fallout become much bigger than anyone expected? To me, that is the real question still hanging over this storyline. I think a major new feud is about to erupt in Port Charles, and this time, Drew Cain may have picked a fight with the one person he really shouldn't underestimate, Sonny Corinthos. Drew has already been stymied in his attempts to get revenge on Willow, but instead of backing down, he seems to be redirecting all that anger towards Sonny. To me, this feud feels bigger than Drew's old problems with Michael. Drew now appears determined to challenge Sonny's influence directly, and that could put him in very dangerous territory. That's why I was paying close attention when Sonny turned to Rick Lansing in the August 12th episode. Sonny clearly wants to figure out how to get what he wants while making sure Drew walks away with as little as possible. But Drew has plans of his own. He's hoping to go head-to-head with Sonny in the auction for Jen Sidwell's most valuable assets. I think Drew sees this as an opportunity to weaken Sonny's position in Port Charles. The problem is, he may not realize just how much trouble he's inviting into his own life. Honestly, I was wondering why Drew isn't simply grateful that he's finally free and focusing on rebuilding his relationship with Scout Quartermain. Instead, he seems to be pouring his energy into becoming the same difficult and ruthless person he was before. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think Sonny's influence disappears simply because he's stepping away from the mob. Sonny has spent years building his power and connections in Port Charles. He's also the kind of character who rarely stays down for long. That makes Drew's current strategy especially risky. If Drew thinks he can simply overpower Sonny, he could be walking straight into another mountain of problems. Willow already managed to get Drew under control because of Jack Brennan's blackmail material. So I have to wonder whether Sonny could eventually get his hands on that information, or uncover something else that could put Drew in an even worse position. Of course, Sonny doesn't necessarily need Brennan's blackmail material to fight back. He knows how to play the long game, and I think he could have several ways of plotting Drew's downfall while protecting his own position. The fallout could be huge because this isn't just a personal battle anymore. Drew and Sonny are connected to so many people in Port Charles that their conflict could drag multiple residents into the chaos. And then there's Ava Jerome. I think her alliance with Drew could become a serious problem once Sonny starts striking back. Ava may believe she knows exactly what she's getting into, but teaming up against Sonny has never been a risk-free decision. So to me, this feud is only getting started. Drew may believe he's finally found a way to challenge Sonny, but Sonny has survived too many battles to be counted out now. If Drew continues down this path, I wouldn't be surprised if the consequences become much worse than he ever expected. General Hospital could be setting up some serious trouble for Drew, and Sonny's response may be the beginning of his biggest problem yet. I think Steve Burton's legal drama with his ex-wife, Cherie Guston, is getting even more complicated. And honestly, it looks like there are two very different versions of what's happening behind the scenes. The General Hospital star, best known for playing Jason Morgan, has been dealing with a messy divorce and custody battle with Cherie for several years. Now, new court filings are bringing their dispute back into the spotlight, particularly when it comes to their daughter Brooklyn. Earlier this summer, Steve filed court papers claiming that Cherie was making it difficult for him to exercise his court-ordered custody time. He alleged that she had repeatedly created obstacles and even refused to allow his wife, Michelle Lundstrom, to pick up Brooklyn on his behalf. I can understand why those claims got fans talking. From Steve's perspective, it appeared he was saying that he wanted to spend time with his daughter, but was being prevented from doing so. But Cherie Guston is now telling a very different story. According to a report from Us Weekly, Cherie alleged in an August court filing that Steve's own decisions have contributed to the situation. She reportedly claimed that his relocation was the second time he had moved across the country without Brooklyn. That detail really changes the picture, at least from her perspective. Cherie reportedly said she signed a stipulation because she believed it was in their daughter's best interest. She also described herself as Brooklyn's stable parent, and allegedly argued that Steve does not currently have a legitimate home for their daughter to stay in on the West Coast. So I think this is one of those situations where it's important not to jump to conclusions. Steve has made serious allegations, and now Cherie is responding with serious allegations of her own. Until the court sorts through the evidence, we're really hearing two competing versions of the same custody dispute. And honestly, I was wondering whether this battle could get even messier before it gets better. From the outside, it certainly appears that communication and trust between these two have broken down badly. Whether Steve is being unfairly denied time with Brooklyn, or whether his relocations have made the custody arrangement more difficult, that's something the court will ultimately have to determine. What stands out to me is that this is no longer just a disagreement between two exes. Their daughter is at the center of everything. And hopefully, whatever happens next will focus on what is genuinely best for Brooklyn. I'll be keeping an eye on this situation as more court developments emerge, because I have a feeling this legal drama is far from over.